What is up, Shepherd Youth? My name is Caleb Walden. I'm one of the youth pastors on staff. We are going through our blog, this is the healthy section. We've been doing a devotional together called Storyteller. And today I'm going to finish that devotional with you. Before I do you want to see my dog? Saucy. Saucy. That's my dog, Sausage. You got a really good close-up of her face. But that's my dog. Back to our Devo now. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to read through day 5 with you. So I'm just going to read it right how they wrote it. And if you go back and listen to all our videos, you will actually have gone through this whole Devo together. So I'll read the Devo and then I'll read a verse and that'll be it for today. And we'll finish Storyteller. So let's read this devotion together. It says, "The parable of the lost son, or the prodigal son, depending on your translation, is another pretty famous Jesus story. This kid takes his dad's money, he runs off to Vegas, he loses all of his money, and then he goes back home frightened and ashamed. And the dad, where you would expect anger and rejection, you actually find love and acceptance of this son who's coming home. It's the perfect picture of God as our loving and gracious Father who will welcome us back regardless of any mistakes we've made or anything we've done in our past." First of all, if you are new to the faith, maybe you're still just checking this whole Jesus thing out, then it might be a new concept to think of God as being willing to welcome you back regardless of your past. As you read this parable, let that truly sink in. Maybe read it a few times. Notice the demeanor of the father, how he never gave up looking and hoping that his son would return. And notice that when the son returns, there is zero "I told you so's," "how could you's." This dad is just ecstatic, joyful. He's beside himself because his son came back. There's no hint of shame, and the father restores all legal rights as a true son in that culture, which in that culture is a big deal. He gives him a ring, he gives him a robe and sandals. All that's in verse 22. But it's truly amazing that God will welcome you back with no shame and regardless of what you've done if you'll just come home. That message never gets old. Now, maybe you're someone who's been around church a long time and perhaps you've been following Jesus for years. And while you're certainly still grateful for God's grace, this whole lost son, loving father thing, it's old for you. You've heard it 1,000 times. And here's what I want you to see in this story. The son fully expected the need to earn his way back into the family. He had a whole speech prepared for his father. He was going to beg him just to be a servant. He'd messed up big and he knew it. He figured there would be some punishment coming his way. After all, that's what he deserved. And while Jesus ends the story with the whole household celebrating the son's return, minus the self-righteous older brother, but that's a different story, I wonder if you or I were playing the part of the son in the story, would we be standing at the party still feeling unworthy? Will we be looking at our dad, wondering if he was just acting happy and loving, or if things were actually going to be weird for the rest of our lives now? Would we be grateful for dad's forgiveness, but unable to forgive ourselves? I think a lot of us fall into a trap, and it's pretty subtle, so most of the time we don't even realize what we're doing. But are you afraid to pray for what you really want because you expect God to say no since you don't deserve it? It's a good question. Because if maybe you feel unworthy, are you afraid to pray for what you really want because you expect God to say no since you don't deserve it? And when good things happen in your life, are you secretly waiting for them to be taken away because it's just too good to be true? And once again, you don't deserve it. When you picture God looking at you, is he smiling and proud of you, or is he angry and disappointed? You see, we can know from this story and know from some Bible answers about how much God loves us and how forgiven we really are, but our minds like to keep quietly telling us that we're worthless and that we don't deserve it and that God is actually still mad at us. But here's the simple truth for those of you who maybe been Christians a long time and aren't getting this yet. The reason Jesus told this story in the first place, when you placed your faith in Jesus, then the punishment, the judgment, the anger for every single sin that you've ever or would ever commit, that was placed on Jesus. His death on the cross paid the price for that sin in full, so that when God looks at you, he doesn't see any of it. He just sees his perfect son or daughter that he desperately wants back. And just like the father in that story, he rejoices and he throws a huge party when you return. Even if it's the 100th, 1000th, millionth time you've returned, God is just still happy to have you run back to him. And so when you beat yourself up and think that, man, God must be mad at me for whatever thing that you did, He's really just looking at you saying, what thing? What are you talking about? Because you're forgiven. So wherever you are in your faith journey today, I want to read this parable together and let it sink in how much God really loves you. I want you to read this together and see that you can return back home no matter what you've done in your past, and you can return back home and be worthy of God's love, even if it's the thousandth time you're returning for the same sin. So let's read this parable together. Luke 15:11-32, it says, "And he said there was a man who had 2 sons. The younger son said to his father, 'Father, give me the share of the property that is coming to me.' And he divided his property between them. Not many days later, the younger son gathered all he had and took a journey into a far country. And there he squandered this in property and reckless living. And when he had spent everything, a severe famine arose in the country, and he began to be in need. So he went and he hired himself out to one of the citizens of that country, who sent him into his field to feed pigs. And he was longing to be fed with the pods that the pigs ate from, because he was so hungry, but no one gave him anything. But when he came to himself, he said, 'How many of my father's hired servants have more than enough bread? But I perish here with hunger. I will arise and go to my father and say to him, Father, I've sinned against heaven and before you. I'm no longer worthy to be called your servant, or I'm no longer worthy to be called your son. So treat me as one of your hired servants.' And he arose and he came to his father. But while he was still a long way off, his father saw him, because his father was waiting for him. And the father felt compassion and ran to him, and he embraced his son and he kissed him. And the son said to the father, 'Father, I've sinned against heaven and you. I'm not worthy to be your son. Make me a servant.' But the father said to his servants, 'Bring quickly the best robe we have and put it on him. Put a ring on his hand, put shoes on his feet, and bring a fattened calf and kill it, because we're going to eat and celebrate. We're having a party. For this son, not this servant, but for this son of mine was dead, but he's alive again. He was lost, but now he is found.' And so they began to celebrate. Now the older son was in the field, and as he came and drew near to the house, he heard music and dancing, and he called one of his servants and asked, what are these things meant? And he said to him, 'Your brothers come home, and your father's killed the fattened calf, because he's received him back safe and sound.' But he was angry, and he refused to go in. His father came out and entreated him, but he answered his father, 'Look, these many years I've served you and never disobeyed your command, yet you give the son, the one who ran away, a celebration.' And he said to him, the father said to him, 'Son, you are always with me, and all that is mine is yours. It was fitting to celebrate and be glad, for this brother was dead and is alive. He was lost, but now he is found.'" So I want all of you to just know and remember from this Devo today how much God loves you, and that you can return to him no matter what your past is. And you can return to him 1,000 times, even after making the same mistake, and you're still a worthy son and daughter of God.